What if some of Jesus' most powerful words were never written in the Bible you hold today? For generations, people believed the record was complete, every teaching preserved, every moment captured, the story finished. But recent discoveries are forcing historians to admit something uncomfortable. The early Christian world was far more complicated than we were taught. Over the last century, ancient manuscripts written in Greek, Coptic, and Aramaic have surfaced from caves, deserts, and forgotten archives. Some of them contain sayings attributed to Jesus that feel familiar, but not identical. The tone is different, more direct, sometimes more intense. These texts weren't random inventions. They were copied, debated, passed around. And at some point, they were left out when the biblical canon was finalized. But one of the most surprising discoveries wasn't found in a cave. It was buried under mud. On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists started digging at a site most scholars had already dismissed. Ancient pilgrims once claimed this was the location of Peter's home, the fisherman who became one of Jesus' closest followers. Modern historians doubted it. They assumed the real place had to be somewhere else. The excavation wasn't glamorous. Thick mud, constant water seepage, weeks of digging with almost nothing to show for it. Then a shovel hit stone. Not loose rock, not debris, solid construction. Slowly, straight walls appeared, clean angles, careful design. As more earth was removed, the curved shape of a church apse came into view. They weren't looking at random ruins. They had uncovered a Byzantine church nearly 1,500 years old. And when they washed away the dirt, color emerged. A detailed mosaic floor, reds, blues, gold, almost perfectly preserved. The mud that hid it had actually protected it. Within the mosaic was a Greek inscription honoring Peter. That alone was significant. But what really shocked the team was what the church was sitting on. It hadn't been built on empty ground. It stood directly over something older, a structure from a much earlier time, which means early believers may have marked this location as sacred long before official church authorities ever organized Christianity into what we now recognize. If this truly was built over Peter's original home, then the stories ancient pilgrims told weren't legends, they were memories. And that changes things, because if early followers went to such lengths to preserve places connected to Jesus, what about his words? What was remembered, repeated, protected, but never included in the final version of the Bible? Because what lies beneath that church floor doesn't just point to a building. It points to a layer of history that suggests something else may have been preserved and possibly left out. Before we reveal what these ancient texts actually say, hit like and subscribe, because most people don't even know this discovery exists. Capital of the Apostles. To understand why this mosaic is so important, you first need to understand its location. This wasn't Jerusalem. It wasn't Nazareth. This was Bethsaida. If you know the Bible, that name should sound familiar. Bethsaida was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was where Jesus healed a blind man. It was where the feeding of the 5,000 took place. In many ways, it functioned as the operational center of the early apostolic movement. But Bethsaida is also known for something else, something unsettling. It was one of only 3 cities that Jesus openly cursed. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus condemns Bethsaida, saying, "Woe to you," rebuking the city for witnessing miracles, yet refusing to change its ways. He warned that it would be brought down to Hades. And history suggests that's exactly what happened. By the 4th century, Bethsaida had become a ghost town. It vanished from maps. Roman writers stopped mentioning it. It was as if the ground itself had swallowed the city whole. For nearly 2,000 years, no one could agree on where Bethsaida actually stood. Two locations battled for the title. One was Et Tel, a rocky hilltop packed with impressive ruins, but far too distant from the water to make sense as a fishing village. The other was El Araj, the swampy shoreline where this excavation was taking place. The debate was intense. Entire academic careers were built around proving one site right and the other wrong. Then the church was discovered, and everything changed. When archaeologists dug beneath the Byzantine mosaic floor, they hit a layer of destruction. Beneath the church were Roman-era homes, and these weren't elite villas or administrative buildings. They were fishermen's houses. The team uncovered lead net weights, fishing hooks, and coins dating back to the 1st century. This was the evidence scholars had been waiting for. A fishing village, active during the exact years Jesus was alive. It was the smoking gun. But there was one more twist, one that made the discovery even more unsettling. The way this church was constructed tells a story, not of chance, but of obsession. The Byzantine builders didn't place the church randomly. They positioned it with extraordinary precision, centering the entire structure over the remains of one specific house. And that raises an obvious question. Why here? In the ancient world, you didn't erect a massive basilica over an ordinary fisherman's home unless that place carried deep significance. The architects of the 5th century went to remarkable lengths to protect this exact spot. They built a protective wall around the original room. They treated the dirt floor of the old house not as rubble, but as a sacred object. Every detail points to the same conclusion. The builders were completely convinced they were standing on the actual home of Peter. Skeptics might argue that the Byzantines were simply guessing, but ancient memory was far more reliable than we often assume. People didn't rely on maps or written records the way we do today. They relied on living memory. Grandfathers brought their grandsons to this place and told them, "This is where the rock of the church once lived." The discoveries at El Araj suggest something remarkable. Despite the curse, despite the city's disappearance, a small community of believers remained. They protected the location. They kept its identity secret. They passed the knowledge down, generation after generation. And when the empire finally became Christian, they did what they had been waiting centuries to do. They marked the site with a monument that would endure. But this monument wasn't built as a simple memorial. It was a vault. And inside that vault, its builders sealed a sentence meant to survive centuries, one that pulls us back to the moment Jesus spoke directly to his followers. This isn't straightforward, though, because what they embedded into the floor wasn't a verse you'll find in any Sunday school lesson. The stones were about to break their silence. The Byzantine code. Let's return to the mosaic. As conservators carefully removed layers of dirt and decay, Greek letters began to emerge. The team gathered around, cameras flashing, hearts pounding. An expert in ancient Greek was called in immediately to translate the inscription on site. It opens with a formal dedication to a bishop. Nothing unusual. But then, the tone shifts. The text mentions Peter, and it doesn't refer to him casually. It calls him the chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. That phrase is explosive. In theology, language is never accidental. The specific Greek words used here carry immense weight. They imply rank, authority, a clear chain of command. They suggest that by the 5th century, right here in rural Galilee, Peter was seen not just as one disciple among many, but as the supreme leader. This strikes at the heart of one of Christianity's longest-running debates: authority. The Catholic Church grounds its legitimacy in the belief that Peter was the first pope, the rock upon which the Church was built. Many Protestant traditions argue the opposite, claiming Peter was simply a leader among equals. But buried beneath the mud of Peter's own hometown is a text that supports the supreme commander view. It shows that local Christians, the people who lived where Peter lived, believed he was in charge. And there's more. The inscription also identifies Peter as the key bearer. That phrase points directly to the moment when Jesus is said to have given Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. But the mosaic doesn't stop at that familiar verse, and this is where the story takes a truly wild turn. The team soon realized the inscription wasn't just a single block of text. It was enclosed within a medallion, a circular frame. And inside that border, barely visible, were smaller, fainter letters. They were difficult to make out, as if they had been slowly worn away by thousands of footsteps over the centuries. Or perhaps they had been carved lightly on purpose, meant to be seen only by those who knew to look. To the naked eye, the words were almost invisible. So the researchers brought in advanced imaging equipment. Infrared scanners were used to see beneath the grime and the damage left by time. When the images appeared on the screen, the entire tent fell silent. What they were seeing was a continuation of the inscription, a quote, and it was written as direct speech, words spoken by the Lord himself to his disciple. Ancient churches often display Bible verses on their walls or floors. That part wasn't unusual, but this text didn't match any known manuscript. It wasn't a standard quotation. It was different, a variation, a deviation, or possibly something even more unsettling. It could have been an earlier version, one that was later edited out. The mood at the excavation changed instantly. This was no longer just an artistic discovery. The team was staring at what appeared to be a record of a conversation that took place 2,000 years ago, just steps from where they were standing. The words were personal, intimate, and they hinted at a cosmic role, an assignment unlike anything recorded in Scripture. The scan revealed something no one expected: the preparation of heaven itself, the preparation of the heavens. Once the infrared scans were processed, linguists got to work. They carefully reconstructed the broken letters hidden within the faint inner ring of the mosaic. Piece by piece, a sentence emerged. It read something like this: "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens." Pause on that for a moment. Guard my house. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Peter to feed my sheep. In Matthew, he calls him the rock on which the church will be built. But nowhere in the accepted New Testament does Jesus ever tell Peter to guard my house. And then there's the second line, "For I go to prepare the heavens." We're familiar with a similar verse, "I go to prepare a place for you," from John 14. But this wording is different, and that difference matters. It suggests a division of responsibility. Jesus is departing to prepare what comes next, while Peter is left behind as a kind of watchman over what remains. Which raises a crucial question. What exactly is the house? If it were only a metaphor for the church, the phrase wouldn't be so striking. But remember where this inscription was found. The church was built directly over a house, Peter's house. What if the ancient tradition wasn't just that Peter lived here? What if the tradition said that Jesus explicitly told him, "Stay here, protect this place, this is the anchor point"? That idea fits with something scholars call the agrapha, sayings attributed to Jesus that survive in ancient texts but never made it into the Bible. Dozens of these sayings exist. Some are strange, some are deeply moving, but finding one permanently carved into the floor of a major pilgrimage site gives it extraordinary weight. It suggests the people of Bethsaida remembered something the gospel writers chose not to record, and the phrase, "Guard my house," reshapes how we see Peter's role. It doesn't frame him as an administrator or manager. It casts him as a protector, a sentinel, someone standing watch. Defense against what? That's where the speculation begins. In early Christian belief, sacred places weren't peaceful by default. They were battlegrounds. These were locations thought to attract opposition, places where unseen forces pushed back hardest. Demons, according to early tradition, were believed to despise holy ground. So when Jesus tells Peter to guard the house, it may not have been a symbolic role at all. It may have been an assignment, one that went far beyond preaching or leadership, a spiritual duty rooted in protection. This discovery also does something else. It narrows the distance between legend and reality. It grounds the story. It turns abstract ideas, like the keys to heaven, into something physical and practical. After all, keys are meant to lock and protect a real place. In effect, the mosaic suggests that the earliest believers saw this exact location, this specific stretch of mud in Galilee, as nothing less than heaven's outpost on earth, an embassy. And Peter wasn't just a teacher there. He was the one left in charge, the ambassador, told to hold the line until the master returned. But there's still another layer to this story, one that moves beyond history and into the mystical, the idea of preparing the heavens. What does that actually mean? It sounds less like a metaphor and more like construction work, as if heaven itself wasn't finished yet. It suggests that while Peter was holding the line on earth, Christ was actively shaping what came next, building, preparing, expanding reality itself. That's a far more dynamic vision of the afterlife than what most people hear in Sunday sermons. The team understood immediately that they were dealing with something explosive. This single sentence seemed to connect earth and sky, history and theology, the physical and the divine. But as with all discoveries like this, there's an even stranger possibility. The final piece of the puzzle isn't buried in the ground. It's written in the stars. The final secret. If we take the inscription at face value, "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens," it immediately raises a difficult question. Why this place? Why this exact location on earth? Why would preparing the heavens require a specific physical spot to be guarded? Some independent scholars and unconventional theologians have quietly suggested a bold idea. They believe certain places on earth may function as spiritual anchor points, locations where the physical world and the spiritual world connect more closely. It's an ancient concept often summarized as above, so below, the belief that the material world reflects the spiritual one. But what if that idea isn't just symbolic? What if it's literal? What if the geography of the earth is more than land and water, more like a network? And what if some locations act like connection points within that network? If Jesus told Peter to guard the house while he prepared the heavens, could Bethsaida have been seen as one of those connection points? A place where two realms overlap? When you look at what happened there, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. This wasn't just another fishing village. It was a place where extraordinary events were said to happen. The blind regained sight. Thousands were fed from a small amount of food. Jesus walked on water, openly defying natural law. From a scientific perspective, it almost appears as if the normal rules of physics felt thinner there, as if reality itself was more flexible. Maybe guarding the house was never simply about protecting a building or even protecting a group of believers. Maybe it was about guarding something deeper, protecting a boundary. That idea connects surprisingly well with certain ancient Gnostic writings that were later rejected by the early church. Many of those texts describe guardians or gatekeepers assigned to watch over thresholds between heaven and earth, light and matter. The mosaic, found at El Araj, may be a surviving trace of that older and more mystical version of early Christianity, a version that did not survive in its original form. As Christianity became more structured under Roman influence, the focus shifted toward organized leadership and doctrine. The more mysterious, cosmic interpretations may have been gradually pushed aside. This discovery also changes how we might see the apostles. Instead of viewing them only as teachers spreading a message, we might consider that they believed they were part of something much larger. Peter was not just a fisherman turned leader. According to this inscription, he was left behind with a responsibility to guard something important while Jesus departed. That suggests the ascension may not have been only a farewell. It may have been a departure that required someone to remain and protect what was left behind. There is also an eerie detail. The church was not destroyed by invaders. In the 8th century, an earthquake buried it. The structure disappeared beneath the earth, sealed for over 1,000 years. Now it has reappeared. The timing feels striking. Perhaps the message was never meant only for Peter. Perhaps it was preserved for future generations. Guard the house, protect the foundation. Today the site is covered again for preservation. But the words have been documented. They cannot be erased. The message has resurfaced. So the question remains, if Jesus gave Peter instructions that were never recorded in the Bible, what else might be missing? Or is this simply a beautiful mosaic flaw that we are reading too much into? Tell us what you think, and if you want more buried history, like and subscribe.